FNAF 4 is a simulation run by Fiona, and this clock proves it. Whether FNAF 4's live-action gameplay is real, a hallucination, or a nightmare has long been a topic of debate. One thing I've always felt confident in, though, is that Scott never intended for dream theory to be real, and he's tried many times since to tell us. The big piece of evidence in MatPat's dream theory video is the grandfather clock.
Listen to the sound that you hear at the end of every night of the first 3 games. A grandfather clock, chiming the same song every time. Why would the end of my shift in an office be signaled by a grandfather clock chime? It wouldn't, unless I was asleep, dreaming in my house with a grandfather clock right outside my room.
However, the clock that plays at the end of every night in FNAF 4 is a digital alarm clock because...
Why? Because we're no longer in the crying child's house. We're in a hospital, trying to recover from being bitten. Hence the pills, IV, and flower Easter eggs. No hospital has a grandfather clock, but they're all equipped with a generic digital alarm clock.
Future entries in the series have since disproven these points. In the real Jake, we get this passage. Margie stood by the door, listening to his breathing. Her closed eyes blocked out the evidence of Jake's illness. They erased the IV stand lurking in the corner of the room, the hospital bed, and the line of prescription medication bottles marching across the top of his chest of drawers. This is telling us that the medical equipment was in the bedroom rather than in a separate hospital room. Couple this with the fact that a child in a coma from a head injury wouldn't need an alarm clock to begin with, and this part of the theory already doesn't pan out. But we also have this quote from Didophobia to consider as well. Rory looked left and right along the length of the wood-floored hall. Like his room, the wall had the chair rail thing and 2 different wallpapers. The paper above the rail was a kind of burgundy orange with a fancy diamond-shaped pattern. The paper below was dark greyish-brown, with splotches of lighter grey in sort of tree-ish shapes. Nothing was in the hallway other than a small hall table with 1 drawer. A lamp the colour of a pale pumpkin sat on the table. This passage specifies only the table and lamp are in the hallway. This could very well be Scott retconning this piece of information in an attempt to get us away from the dream/coma theory. He wants us to think more about what's actually happening in front of us. But the biggest hole in this theory comes from FNAF 4 itself. MatPat says that the child in the FNAF 4 live-action house hears the grandfather clock down the end of the hallway. Yet, somehow he couldn't possibly be hearing the digital alarm clock sitting on top of his chest of drawers? This little alarm clock is my white whale in FNAF. I'm obsessed with it. I see little references to it everywhere, and I'm fully convinced it's Scott trying to hint to us that we've missed it. In the FNAF movie, Mike wakes up at 6 AM to that style of alarm clock. The graphic novels of Step Closer and Hide and Seek both have panels that directly zoom in on this style of alarm clock in the protagonist's bedrooms. And in each of these stories, the protagonist is a stand-in for an Afton child, Pete being Mike and Toby being the crying child. And this is allegedly the Afton household. It's worth noting as well that Bunny Call shows clocks twice in the story, but neither are this clock. One is analog and the other is Bob's digital watch. And in Help Wanted's Night Terrors section, we must look directly at the alarm clock on the chest of drawers to know what time it is. Scott wants us to notice this damn digital clock, and here it is again, sitting on top of the cradle in Secret of the Mimic. Fiona has been making simulations of everything in this series, and that's exactly what FNAF 4 is. But the catch is that she's been mixing up the details. Firstly, the FNAF 4 bedroom is David's bedroom, but it's wrong. It's smaller and has 2 doors instead of 1. Secondly, she's combined David's storybook animals with urban legends about the animatronics and the FNAF 1 gameplay mechanics, causing them to happen in the bedroom. Thirdly, she's taken the story, whether fact or fiction, of a sick child dying in their bedroom and added the IV pole, pills, and flowers to the room. In Security Breach, we find this endoskeleton training mural. Since the endoskeletons are trained off of the Mimic AI program, they need to learn what is right and wrong. This mural says the FNAF 4 bedroom being associated with hospital equipment is wrong. Fiona has made a mistake here, one the company doesn't want the endoskeletons to repeat. But why make the simulation in the first place? We know the FNAF 4 bedroom is connected to the office in Sister Location. Night Terrors, Didophobia, and Sister Location all prove this. And the Funtime animatronics contain Mimic technology, to the point that we even thought Baby was the first iteration of the Mimic. So whatever the simulation is for has something to do with Sister Location's purpose. In Didophobia, we're told the whole thing was a nasty experiment to study the effects of ongoing fear in children. But I think the truth is actually written right before that. It was fake. Everything he'd thought he knew about his life was a lie. Did I ever have the life I thought I was living? Rory wondered. Although his memories were fuzzy, Rory had clear images in his head of his mum and dad. He could remember talking with them and doing things with them. The same could be said of school and his friend Wade. In Rory's mind, the house he'd woke up in that morning was his house. But none of the images in Rory's head were real. Nothing in Rory's life was real. This reminds me a lot of Charlie. Look down, Elizabeth whispered. What? Charlie whimpered. Your memory. I'm sure it's crystal clear, since you were there and all, Elizabeth smiled. Look down. Charlie returned to her memory, standing in front of her father's workbench. She was immobile. She didn't have a voice. Charlie looked to her feet, but didn't see feet at all. Only 3 legs of a camera tripod anchored to the ground. He was making memories for you, making a life for his little rag doll, making her a real girl. Make no mistake, Charlie wasn't there. Charlie's finally coming to understand that she's a robot. Henry faked her memories to recreate the child he lost. That was one of our theories for sister location. William was experimenting on children to put the crying child back together. Perhaps he wants to do it in the same way Edward and Henry did, by making a robot child. I've never really liked that theory, but it seems more plausible now than it used to be. If that's the case, then I don't think the simulation was meant to be scary. I think Fiona mixed her stories up, creating the horror we see in FNAF 4 by accident. If it was meant to be scary, however, then I don't believe William was trying to recreate his own endoskeleton child. He's training endoskeletons for another purpose. I've got a few ideas, but none seem right even though I think they're all valid concepts. So this is where I'd love a better theorist than me to jump in and try and figure it out. Until then, I'll keep mulling it over. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.